Awesome. And there's a clicker for the first stage one? Awesome. Well, okay. Well, that went quicker than expected. Sweet. Thank you. So it falls to me to run the last session of this awesome workshop. And foolishly, I said that during the last TAIAO meeting that wouldn't it be cool if we all kind of commented on how we use generative AI in the context of environmental science. And now I'm here having volunteered for this panel discussion, and I called it Generative AI and ChatGPT, how does seemingly sentient technology relate to environmental data science? And it's a very loaded question and topic, but it's purposefully so that we stimulate a discussion here. And yeah, so for a year, just a little over a year now, we've all been blown away by generative AI. So we've all played with ChatGPT and image creators based on very simple and straightforward text input. And in contrast to traditional AI, which is sort of more geared towards detecting patterns and making decisions and honing analytics and classifying data, this generative AI seems to be coming up with its own ideas and with its own sort of concept of what things look like, and generate actually text that reads really well. A text that's written so that it's really hard to distinguish from somebody, a person having written it. And I'm not going to go into any detail of how they work. There are people in here that know much more about this. The buzzwords here are transformers and large language models, and we can talk about that later over beer probably. However, I think we've all been having very similar sort of feelings when this first came out. These generative AI technologies that were made available for free to the public. And there was a lot of excitement in terms of, look what I can do. I can now write a lot quicker if I just get ChatGPT to write an introduction or a summary to my text, and it actually reads quite well. And then I do tell ChatGPT to refine this, and it gets even better. So we were totally amazed as to how computers could actually do this. And then we thought, okay, what's going to happen to my job when this actually becomes commonplace? And I may be more efficient and faster at writing and doing analyses, but what about my kids and what about their jobs? So there's quite a bit of uncertainty and possibly fear, letting alone sort of fear of what happens when computers start developing their own thoughts and making decisions that are not good for mankind, but for computers themselves. So are we ending up in the Matrix or in the Terminator sort of verse? So suffice to say that there are all kinds of mixed feelings here. One thing that I'd like to just briefly talk about is how ChatGPT has recently been used to write a science paper, and not just to write a science paper, but to generate the actual paper. So this is a paper that, lo and behold, has not passed all the formal review processes as far as I know, but it's been, it's a conceptual work by two scientists that provided a data set to ChatGPT, and a process that mimics the scientific process from an initial data exploration through to data analysis, writing the paper, and then reiterating on this to make it better. So they've wrote a little program to prompt ChatGPT to actually write a paper. So this is a paper that's, I don't know, 4 or 5 pages long. The URL for the paper is down here. There's a nice Nature News article that describes some of the process. When you read this paper, it actually reads quite well. So it's been called fluent, insightful, and presented in the expected structure for a scientific paper. It's it is about diabetes and the factors that cause diabetes in people. And it says, hey, if you eat more vegetables and are more active, then you have a lesser chance of getting diabetes. So it's nothing particularly new and exciting about it, but I think it's new and exciting that this is sort of a computer could come up with this. Of course, there are also some of the typical hallucinations and untruths in this paper that are becoming harder and harder to detect. But the fact that this paper exists and was written almost entirely by a machine is quite astounding. And we've only been a year into the availability of a tool such as ChatGPT. So where are we going to be next year? Where are we going to be the year after that? And those are questions that I hope that my amazing panel, which is all fully arrived here now, can help answer. And so I'd like to just briefly introduce the panel, and maybe the four of you can just come up as well. So we've got Madeline Newman, the Executive Director of the AI Forum, Bernhard Pfahringer from the University of Waikato, Professor with the Computer Science Department, Isabel Leeming, Communications and Engagement Advisor at BECA, and Taka Keegan, Associate Dean Maori at University of Waikato. Ollie is here to help me moderate the discussion and ask some questions, unless you all come up with great questions as well. So please come up. Thank you. Very good. So I'd like to just introduce, go through the panelists one by one, and have a few words of from each of you to just introduce yourselves, what your experience with artificial intelligence is, and just sort of some general words of how you feel about this technology. And I'd like to start with Madeline. And so you've been working with industry and startups a lot. You've been instrumental in the New Zealand AI strategy that came out a couple of years ago. And since you've been working with industry so much, I'm wondering if you might be able to say a few words on describing where companies, startup companies and established industry is on the sort of excitement, amazement, and fear spectrum when it comes to AI. Thank you, Madeline.
Thank you. It's a bit like being on class.
Excuse me, we're going to grab a microphone for you. So, thank you.
Yeah, I'm not a lecturer, so I don't have natural, presence. So from let me put it this way. So a year ago, I've been in this particular role for just over a year. When I first joined, all anybody wanted to talk about was facial recognition technology and cyborgs, and when were they going to kill us? And then ChatGPT came along, and suddenly everyone was like, wow, this is amazing stuff. Oh, great, Madeline, can you come and talk to us about it? And now we're back to like, when are they going to kill us? But in the interim, so prior to that, there was a really good report produced by the AI Forum with Curious, which talked about which analysed the state of AI in New Zealand. And at that point in time, so September, October 2021, only 1 in 6 New Zealand companies had AI anywhere near their strategy. And we all know that there were already lots of decisions being made for you every single day of your lives, including in your business life. And so that was a little bit scary, because there were no controls in place for the majority of New Zealand companies. And then generative AI came along, and it's even worse. So everybody's playing with it. But the majority of those companies still do not have any controls in place. And there is no strategy for New Zealand. So there's no government imperative to get controls in place, or even to direct how New Zealand wants to respond to it. So these are societal level changes that are happening to us. And there's not anything there currently that the government is particularly leading on. So there's little bits of work happening in different places, and there's some general sort of guidance, but there isn't that strategy. And that's kind of, that's the scary bit for me. I think from a productivity perspective, it's fantastic. And you've all given some really, really good examples about why that is the case today. So it's got some amazing positives, but a little bit scary too.
Thank you. That's a very great start into our panel discussion. I'd like to just hand over to Bernhard. Bernhard, you and I have been around for a long time, but you specifically said 20 years ago, artificial intelligence was an aspiration, but now the reality with far-reaching implications. So because you've been a computer science researcher for a while, did it surprise you that this came up, that this ChatGPT and a text-based input to a very complicated system that then produced really sensible output? Or if it didn't surprise you, what else surprised you? Or why didn't it surprise you?
Okay, thanks everyone. Yeah, I'm Bernhard Pfahringer from the University of Waikato. I always hate it when someone reminds me of all the nonsense I've said a few months ago. No, but yes, it totally surprised me in the terms of the speed that it came around. Because I'm not sure if, who knows when GPT-3 was released?
I think it was November last year. Or...
No, GPT-3, not ChatGPT. Because they all forgot about it. That was already 4 years ago. And it was interesting. It was useful to play around with. It was generating interesting text, but it had some really weird quirks. And some people already were wondering what's going to happen next, that most people ignored it. And then over the last few years, places like OpenAI kind of perfected the technology by adding missing bits to make it into a useful product. Not just the user interface that we heard about today is very important, but also the underlying technology to make it more like a chatbot and more usable. And then suddenly ChatGPT was released last year in November, and it was enormous in terms of uptake. And it's fun to play with. And I have a lot of things to say about it, but it can't take all the time. So I just basically want to say two things that you should take away from this. I think we should all use more generative AI. But we should also disclose the use, and we should be extremely critical of what we generate that way, because it needs to be double checked. And I can tell you a few nice anecdotes of stuff that has already happened in New Zealand, which is partly embarrassing, but also partly entertaining. And maybe I have time for that later.
Thank you very much. Perfect. Taka, thank you for grabbing the microphone here. So you've tested the skill of ChatGPT to write TAIAO Maori and found it to be good. I've also read that Tiana Tauru had ChatGPT write a karakia in TAIAO, and he was quite impressed. So arguably, I think ChatGPT must have had a lot fewer sort of training data sets in Maori to learn the language than it would have had for English or other languages. But how do you see the potential for generative AI to promote the preservation and revitalization of Te Reo Maori as a language?
Okay, kia ora everybody. So when ChatGPT came out with an ability to speak Te Reo Māori, there was a lot of people that were surprised at how well it worked. Especially some people who've been working with natural language processing for Te Reo Māori, because there, like you've said, there isn't much data available for it to train on. So the question is, it works so well, it must work so well based on some good data. Where did it get its data? And then the answer is, well, it scraped it from the web. There's a lot of Māori language data on the web. I mean, so that kind of brings up a flag, because the people who are placing Māori language data on the web, mostly on social media, aren't placing it there with the view that it will be sucked up by this tool. And so from some respects, the fact that it works really well is great for Te Reo Māori, because it allows more people to engage with Te Reo Māori. But then from another perspective, it's actually quite threatening for Te Reo Māori. And there's kind of two ways that it's threatening. The first way that it's threatening is that ultimately these tools are about generating money, generating profit, but all of that profit isn't going back to the people that have donated the language data. So they're missing out on that profit. Most of those people are in struggling for money. Here's a resource that they have, it's been sucked away and then money's been made out of it. So the economy of that AI tool is one aspect, but then the other aspect is that there's a loss of control about what it says. So it says what it wants to say, it works really well, but it's kind of giving the one ground truth for Te Reo Māori, whereas no Māori experts are able to get in and say, well, actually, this is wrong and this is right. So it's taken away the control, the sovereignty of how we're speaking our language. And because it works so well, and because it's so cheap, and because it's so fast, it will get used a lot. So there's the fear that, as Bernhard was saying, we need to be careful about when it hallucinates and not to believe it too much. But there's the fear from Māori language activists that this tool will take away that control, and as a consequence, the language, Māori language, will suffer. So,
yeah. So I can hear that, and for me, it would be really beneficial for me to be able to translate a word, a phrase into Te Reo Māori, for example, for dual packaging labeling, right? So if you see this more and more often, and where I used to live in Canada, it was the law that you had to have English and French on any packaging that you bought. So the country was way more bilingual, and if language therefore sort of transcended this much more, and so I could use ChatGPT to put a label onto a product, but I would have to still get somebody who speaks the language and knows the language to make sure that this is used in the right way.
but it would kind of speed up the process.
Yes.
Because it's just a checking rather than someone else writing it all in the first instance. So yeah, pluses and minuses.
Yeah. So last but not least in the introduction round, Isabel from BECA. And you're a public engagement and communication specialist. So this is great. So I asked ChatGPT what it could do to help public engagement and communication in the sense of for environmental science. And it said it could facilitate online discussions, workshops, seminars, and provide answers to questions that are difficult to answer. But how would you do that? I said to ChatGPT, and I can answer questions from the public. I can simplify complex concepts, and I can generate educational content such as articles, and I can help you design infographics. And I said, design me an infographic, and it said, sorry, I can't do that. But sounds great, Isabel. How do you see this? Have you used this for that purpose, and what were your experiences?
Yeah, I feel like I need to give a disclaimer first. I am no AI expert. I have been in the AI world directly for probably about a year. So don't quote me too much. But to answer your question with public engagement and using generative AI, there's definitely space to do so. And we have been actually in the past, well, currently at the moment. There is generative AI out there at the moment. For instance, there's one called Frankly AI. That's with Matt Enzor that we were just talking about before. And you can use it to talk to the diverse communities that's really hard to engage with. One of the problems that I specifically, or the BECA has problems with, is when we do workshops face-to-face, there's always going to be a problem with the time of the workshop. There's always going to be a problem with the date or the location for any single community member. So having the generative AI options really helps us make sure that we're including everyone in some of the feedback that we need to get. And with Frankly AI, and this kind of touches on to Taka's mentioned before, there are generative AIs that can talk in multiple languages, including Te Reo Māori. And the great thing about Frankly AI is that it actually recognizes Māori data sovereignty, and it talks to the people who are putting into Frankly AI, talk to the iwi and make sure that it's still good. I think that answers.
Thank you. Awesome. Really happy that you're here. And now I'd like to hand over to the audience. Who here has been using generative AI for their research? I know we've all played with it in our own room, but yeah, hands up, research use. I've used it to write stuff. Awesome. So we see half of the room maybe putting up their hands. Okay, our guest from Canada. How have you used it?
I mean, my first language is French, right?
Yep.
So I think that it's actually a drawback when you write a paper because English, I'm okay in English, but it's not my natural language. So now I can use actually ChatGPT to suggest me, new formulation. One of the drawbacks, I'd say that it's removing some of the perk of being a French teacher when you write in English, like expression and things like this that you would put in the text. So it gets the text more standard, more neutral, I'd say. But otherwise, I mean, it's extremely helpful. I've learned a couple of things in English from actually.
Yeah, you lose some individuality in the prose. That's exactly. Probably a very good point. Yeah. Anybody else? Yeah, Barbara.
But ChatGPT was coming back with enforced tea breaks, which I didn't want to have because it was online meeting. So it was really hard struggle, and ChatGPT was coming back with those revised schedules, still having the breaks inside, but it was helpful.
I'm very health conscious. And Karin? Also everybody think about questions for the panelists while we're listening to Karin.
So my PhD student who's trying to finish from Brazil, he sent me his second chapter with the abstract written with very exuberant language. And it was absolutely terrible. So I think that, and then he wrote back, I was just trying to check to see if you could detect ChatGPT as a supervisor. But I think that his problem was he wasn't prompting it very well. And so it was making this very generic and really exuberant adjectives that just sound stupid, to be honest. But anyways, I did have a serious question. I guess my interest is with that paper that Moritz put up. A lot of environmental data that we collect is monitoring data. There's a lot of it. It takes a long time for people to go through it, make it into a report. A lot of it's very workmanlike, and a lot of the papers that we publish in not really high quality journals, perhaps, but are very reporting what we saw, how it changed. And I just wonder whether this could just take that over and synthesize and report on that kind of data to leave people time to think about interesting introspectives on data. So what did you think? Do you think that's a good thing? Or do you think it's just dangerous?
Yeah, who in the panel would like to take that?
I don't mind taking that one. It's a product. It's there to make you superhuman. So yeah, if you can make it, I mean, obviously it hallucinates, so you've got to check the work. But it is there to make you to supercharge your capability and the resources that you have around. That's what it's most good at is making people more productive. I was just going to add something on the Frankly AI thing, talking about different conversations. If you can currently get a free, and I'm not giving a plug to BECA, but I do think it's quite cool. You can get a free license for Frankly Me at the moment. And if you get that one, if you've got a school, so university, Microsoft account, you can get it through that for free for the next 6 months. You can set it to snarky mode, so it'll answer you back. It's quite funny.
Yeah, just to follow up on that, my answer would be yes, you should, but you should be careful. It can be dangerous. But basically, from my point of view, this whole stuff is just another tool, and computer scientists always want to automate everything, and it's just the next level of automation. So basically, what you might call donkey work is being done by the machine now instead of you. But you will have to look at what it generates and be careful about it. So one thing I found, most of my students are not native English speakers. There was a particularly bad abstract, and I won't name anyone here. And I put that through ChatGPT. The person's not here, but it doesn't matter. And there was nice English, but it also has subtly changed the content. So something that was like more like a hypothesis or a potential thing mentioned was now a strong, this happened. And it wasn't that immediately easy to pick it up, but you have to carefully read it, because otherwise you'll be saying things that you don't want to say. But it still helps. And it was faster improving the abstract that way than manually rewriting it.
Thank you, Taka.
So I just have a question, and perhaps it's for the audience, and perhaps some of our AI experts could maybe answer it. But if we're doing some new research and we put it into ChatGPT to correct our text, is there a fear that because ChatGPT is learning what we're putting in, is there a fear that our research will turn up on somebody else's question or somebody else's response?
Yeah, I think Madeline is itching to answer that.
You should absolutely pay for a license and switch the capability for it off to use your data for training data, because it will. You talk to so AWS, really good example. There, a whole bunch of their software developers got into trouble earlier this year with their legal department because their code that they'd been using in they've been using Copilot to help them write better code, had turned up in some other people's code. So because it was the best code for whatever it was, they got into trouble. Their response was, yes, but you really liked it when we were 10 times more productive. So I don't think anybody lost their job over it, but you have to pay for a license, and you have to switch that ability off if you want to maintain your copyright, your IP.
Thank you.
Well, I was just going to actually go back to Karen's question as well, but and mention what you think. I think as well, generative AI has just become a tool for content writers, which is really good for me. It's like a calculator to mathematicians. It's like chainsaws to woodcutters. I don't see it as something that will ultimately take reporting or writing. I, at the moment, don't like using it to write my stuff. I think, like how you said, it comes up with these big words that nobody uses, and then everyone gets lost in the meaning, and they can change the meaning as well. So I think that it can help with reports and writing reports, but as long as you're checking what you're writing, checking what's coming out, and using it for different capabilities like the graphs that come out to help you there. Sorry.
Okay. I want to come back to the thing about putting stuff into ChatGPT or in some other tool, and that then being distributed to the world implicitly. I think that's a big problem. And so anything that's sensitive, you should have a model on premises. You can have models on premises now, or at least have a contract where you pay for that. They guarantee you not to collect it. Because the same is actually true for search engines. I don't know if you ever thought about that, but if I was at Google and I was kind of looking for new machine learning ideas, I would just look at what I was Googling every day and then probably get a good idea. So everything you put into an online system where people collect it, you need to expect that someone might take advantage of that. And that's, you get it for free. That's why you don't have to pay for it, basically. And coming back to the Taka, I'm much more positive about ChatGPT and the future of TAIAO Māori. I think used the right way, it can really make the use of the language soar in New Zealand. Because basically, like some Canadians have already pointed out, it's an official language, so it should be taught to everyone at school so that everyone actually has some proficiency in it. And then everything could just be in both languages, and we would have an end to all these quarrels about what type of name do I use for X.
Excellent. We've got a few minutes left. Oh, there's a question there.
AI and discovering new research topics. Like you could search for something, and if you found that there wasn't actually an answer for this, then you might want to do some research in this because it would be groundbreaking. Because you can search so much quicker using these types of tools. What kind of opportunities do you see rather than what's so scary?
That sounds like a good question. Can you ask ChatGPT's show me your research questions nobody ever asked before?
So if I understood you correctly, you're asking whether instead of just using a search engine and having to come up with very good search queries and wading through lots of results, would it be faster to use ChatGPT or something similar like that? If that's your question, I would say yes. And I've been kind of pushing myself to use it a little bit more like that. But actually not ChatGPT, because ChatGPT is pretty bad in terms of making up references. There's similar things. There's a search engine called Perplexity AI, and there's a other chat tool called POE.com that's done by Quora, where they're much better in actually providing real references. So I'm not sure if we can show that. I've just prepared a query over there where basically I was asking for, are there some sampling methods related to bagging? So the machine learning people will know what that means. And it brings up like 6 or 7 articles that are all relevant, that I can immediately judge from the title that they're relevant to my question. So yes, it's probably faster and might give me better ideas. Yeah, and personally, I don't mind if someone logs that and maybe does some interesting research, because there's so much research to be done. And it's just great if someone does it and publishes it. I don't have time to do all that stuff. I have too many ideas anyway. Most of them are probably grabbed. So anyway, anyone else can say something?
Excellent. There's a few more questions here, and then we would probably take you to, and then I'm going to go back and change the topic slightly. Thanks.
All right. I've been looking at I frequent the public forums quite often surrounding what called generative AI, and it seems to be a bit of public fear about the role of generative AI and the security of the jobs. Some of the Screenwriters Association Guild, and also some of the artists part of their protests and part of their objections to this is basically the safety of their jobs and protection from themselves against generative AI. Do you feel that this is an overreaction? And since the genie is out of the bottle, how do we actually address that with the public?
Yeah, thanks, Nick. I'll move that on to the next topic. That's a great seg. No, that's all good. We do have beers waiting in the pub later on, not too long. So I'll move on to...
How many topics do we have, actually? This was a question to be sure. Do you have how many topics? I will going to...
No, this is... I just wanted to talk about maybe the fear aspect and have some specific questions for the panel members, and that would cover that. No, that's great. Thanks for doing that. So, I just recently read this book, Scary Smart, by Mo Goddard, and he was the director of Google X for a while, and really instrumental in artificial intelligence development, and then he's quit his job for a number of reasons, including personal reasons, and he's now writing books and giving podcasts. And he said that there are 3 inevitables of AI, and this is where we also come back to the sort of the sentient idea that I have. So the first inevitable is that AI will happen, and he's not speaking about the AI that we're using here right now, but it's sort of sentient AI that is able to make rational decisions, that's aware of its surrounding, and that's has an ability to understand temporal impacts and themes of its decisions, and able of critical thinking. It will also be smarter than us, and not just a little bit smarter, because AI can perform in many tests just as well as humans do at this point. In many tasks, it is way better, but it'll become 1 billion times smarter than us in 13 years. And so if you look at the impacts of climate change, we're looking for impacts within, they're happening now, but really big impacts of maybe 10, 20 years away. The impacts are just going to be 2 or 3 years away, according to Mo. also bad things will happen. So not just people losing their jobs, but AI will make decisions and produce information that is not in the best interest of us people, and will make errors and mistakes in training AI. And so I would just kind of like to hear some of the panelists' comments on this. And again, Bernhard said, and I quote, "You don't have to worry about this. We're going to be fine." And I hear from Taka that he's afraid that AI really endangers the sovereignty of Mauritania, and I'm just wondered what sort of some of those thoughts are, and how we can deal with it, and how we can avoid those problems, those bad things to happen to us. Who would like to start?
I don't mind. We can kind of answer that question as well.
Yeah,
at
thanks.
the same time. So the first question that's up there in your question as well about people and your job. Yes, it will change your job. It'll change it dramatically. It's going to change everybody's job, but your job was not going to be the same in 10 years' time anyway. It wasn't the same. The job that you're doing today was, if you have a job, even if you're a student, it's not the same as it was 10 years ago or 10 years before that. It definitely will change, but it was going to anyway. I'll give you quite a classic example. I think we talked about this earlier. If you think about Excel, when that was introduced, everybody thought that would be the end of accountants. It wasn't. There's more of them now. It has this type of technology has the ability to change the rest of the world, just like social media did with journalism. So now there's this job called social influencer that did not exist in 2010. It did not exist, and now there are billionaires with that as a job title. So yes, it will impact your job. Yes, it will change your job. Will it put you out of a job? Probably not. And I think Yun Singh, you said in a panel we were on a month or so ago, talking about the fact that there isn't any whole complete job that a human does currently that AI is capable of taking over in its entirety. So what it will do, and what that means is it has the potential, especially in a country like New Zealand, to make us more productive. So if you were sitting in the US or the EU, you'd probably be a little bit more, or China, you'd probably be a little bit more worried about the future of your employment because you're in a country with lots and lots of people. But in New Zealand, where we have low productivity, which is great because it means we've got potentially great upside from this stuff, and we have a low population. Which means that, we can supercharge our people without necessarily making anyone redundant. Actually plays out in real life as well. So in areas like advanced manufacturing, what you see is where this is domestic as well as international stats, 80% of companies that use advanced manufacturing techniques or adopt them actually employ the same number of people or more than they did previously. So overall, positive impact. Not for everybody. There's still that other 20%, but then 10% of companies fail anyway. So overall, pretty good. Moving on to death and destruction.
Sorry, I just wanted to add to that as well. I agree completely. I think it's going to change jobs. I don't think it's going to take jobs. A lot of when ChatGPT first came out, there was a lot of worry towards the arts, and particularly my job as well, comms and engagement. But I think it's really important to remember that with each of these jobs, there's a lot of, for a person to succeed, you need to be book smart. Yes, you also need to be street smart. You need to have the contextual information of the politics of the who, what, where, when, why, and you need to be able to integrate that at any moment. And I don't think AI can do that at the moment.
Machines are really poor.
Sorry?
They're very poor. They have a very low emotional quotient.
Yes. Yeah.
I have a question related to following on from that for Taka. So Vanessa told us today in her presentation about her program that she's leading and how that's about enabling smaller communities that aren't connected to be able to access research and science and innovation funding. What are your thoughts about that with these kinds of innovations, given that a lot of those communities are already being left behind? Is there any way that we could leapfrog or something like that to, because it's evolving so fast. So that wasn't very coherent, but.
So my thoughts are still evolving, shall we say? But in terms of AI in smaller communities, indigenous communities, my thinking is, wouldn't it be good if we had an AI from each different community? So I had the example earlier where the AI works really good for English, but I'm losing some of my French. But the French perspective, the French angle, there should be an AI being able to provide that as well, because they're two different angles. So, wouldn't it be good if, and I don't think it would be appropriate to have a Māori AI, because there's not really one Māori viewpoint, but there's different iwi viewpoints. So this is some of the work that we're trying to work on at the moment, actually. How could we have like a Ngāti Maniapoto AI, or a Tūhoi AI, or a Waikato AI, so that the knowledge, the thinking, the ground truths in those particular areas wasn't overridden by one whole ground truth. So if we could get AI working in that way, then I think that would be awesome. So that's what we're thinking about.
It's very interesting. Thank you.
Yeah, can I just add, actually, when I arrived in New Zealand, I started to tell some French joke to New Zealand and nobody was smiling at me. And I understood, and then God, give me a joke, actually, and I couldn't understand this joke as well. So I think there is probably something that I should have a French brain, put it into AI and maybe a little bit different from New Zealander on an English one.
So I think one opportunity that we can have with AI is also to protect, cultural difference. Because I can give a bit of context. I have a friend that is from France here. So we both speak French, right? And when I was a kid, we used to have our own translation of TV. But over time, they said, yeah, it costs too much. So we're going to do international French, right? So it actually diluted culture, right? Because you lose some regional things about the language. And I think it's the same even with Maori, right? You have those kind of different sub-language and things like this. So everywhere around the world, we have these things. And because of money, we tend to, dilute them and make things more homogeneous, right? So I think with AI, we can start having specifically trained model to copy a little bit the regional specificities of a language.
So in my previous job, I was head of innovation and product for a mental health and wellbeing digital app, and we did develop a chatbot that was capable of delivering cognitive behavioral therapy. Now, CBT is really, really well understood field of psychology. There's lots and lots of it's a very methodical approach, and it's very, very well understood. So it lent itself really well. What it meant though was that that chatbot had to respond to each individual in an individual way. And that's one of the bonuses of this technology, and especially with the speed at which it can deliver messages to you in the way that you understand them best. It doesn't matter what language that's in or what inferences you use, that's what it's great for. And it means that from a business perspective, there's no excuse anymore for exclusion, for financial exclusion, for whatever exclusion, because it can be tuned to each individual.
I have a comment about the diversity. I think you'd be surprised how well that already works implicitly if you prompt your chatbot the right way. So for instance, with ChatGPT, I was playing around with it because I was curious. I was asking it to generate stories in the Viennese version of German. And it was very good at that. I think what we underestimate is the enormous amount of training data that has gone into those large language models and the diversity that's behind that. But having said that, of course, what you really want is to enforce that by have specialized models that are specifically trained on good sources of that specific data. And that's kind of where I also see a good opportunity for something which is maybe more TAIAO specific. You could see a language model that has been fine-tuned at least on basically all the relevant environmental data science literature, so that you can then have very specific interactions for your research area and get very high quality responses out of it.
Beautiful. Thank you. We're getting really close to full time. So we just heard from Madeline and Bernhard, and perhaps some final words from Isabel and Taka to close off, if you'd like, or and then I think we all had a very productive day, and we might just close it.
So, final words. In terms of AI, I think there's a bright future. You know, I think if we can harness it, it's amazing what it can do. So, it's my final words.
And I guess for my final words, as a comms and engagement person, I am very excited for generative AI and ChatGPT, and I hope that it keeps continuing and supports me as I go through my profession as well. It really helps me hone in on the parts of my jobs that I really enjoy, the strategy and getting to understand different audiences and perspectives. And it really helps me with writing to those perspectives. So keep going.
Thank you very much. So I was going to just make some notes and summarize the most important points, but I don't think I need to. We've had 4 great closing statements, and please join me in thanking the panel members, and thanks to you for asking questions.
Thank you.
Awesome. Thanks.
Thank you, Moritz. Very good panel discussion, very good discussion. Yep. And yep, I will let Albert for final words.
Yeah. Thanks, everyone. Just to conclude the event before the karakia. So just to say thanks to everyone. I think we had a very good workshop. We had very exciting talks. We have 2 keynotes that were Christo and Vanessa that were great. We have this group discussion led by Yun Singh that was really good, and this panel here was amazing. So yeah, let's conclude this. I think that we really need to thank Zuhaida to organize this event for all the work that she has been doing. And also Phil for sharing the event. Thank you so much. And thanks everybody for being here and participating of this event. I hope that you enjoy it, and I hope that to see you next year. I'll pass to Taka. Thanks.
Kia ora everyone. So just a final karakia. We started our day with a karakia, so it makes sense to finish it with a karakia. And this karakia talks about taking everything that we've learned today, embracing it and carrying it on with us for when we leave here, and then safe journeys home as well. So unuhia ki te uru tapu nui, Kia wātea, kia māma te nā koutu tinana te wairua I te ara takatū. Ko rā e rongo whakairi aki ki runga kia tīna, tīna. Haumi e hui e, tae ki e. Kia ora everyone.
One last thing before you leave, there is a lot of food outside. We put some containers, so yeah, please take some food home so we are not wasting it. Thank you, everybody.